Cillian Murphy's 28 years later return would make Jim's death almost inevitable. Cillian Murphy's confirmed return to the 28 Days Later franchise in 28 Years Later has electrified longtime fans, reigniting speculation about the fate of his character, Jim. But as thrilling as the prospect of seeing the original protagonist back on screen is, it also comes with a grim inevitability. If Jim returns, he almost certainly has to die. And not just for the sake of drama, but because it's the only narrative path that truly honors his original arc and the themes the franchise has always embodied. Jim's survival was a miracle and a statement. When 28 Days Later premiered in 2002, Jim was not a hardened survivor. He was an everyman, a bicycle courier who woke from a coma into a world ravaged by the rage virus. He wasn't trained, armed, or prepared. Yet he survived. More than that, he adapted, transformed, and ultimately became a protector for the people he loved. His survival was the central heartbeat of the film. In a world of inhumanity, Jim found something worth fighting for, and perhaps more importantly, someone to fight for. In the theatrical ending, Jim escapes with Selena and Hannah to rural safety, waiting for rescue. In a film drenched in bleakness and horror, that ending felt like a quiet act of rebellion, hope in the face of extinction. But 28 Days Later was never meant to be a happily ever after tale, and that hope was always fragile. The passage of time demands sacrifice. If 28 Years Later follows through with Murphy reprising his role as Jim, it can't ignore the passage of nearly 3 decades. Jim would now be a man in his 50s, likely hardened by loss, trauma, and the constant struggle to survive. And in a franchise that has repeatedly shown how unforgiving this world is, his continued survival stretches the boundaries of plausibility. The story can't simply pick up with Jim as a grizzled survivor who has been quietly thriving off-screen for 28 years. That undermines the oppressive, ever-present danger that defines the 28 series. Worse, it threatens to turn Jim into a kind of mythic figure, untouchable, invincible. That's the opposite of what made him resonate in the first place. For 28 Years Later to maintain its grim realism, Jim's story must end. And that ending will likely be tragic. A hero's death that closes the circle. If Jim dies in 28 Years Later, it won't be because the franchise is nihilistic. It'll be because his death completes the emotional and thematic arc he began in 28 Days Later. Jim was a man thrust into apocalypse, who learned to kill not for revenge or power, but to protect others. In the end, he was a symbol of human resilience. Bringing him back only to kill him might seem cruel, but if handled right, it could be redemptive. Perhaps he dies saving someone else, maybe Selena, maybe a child, maybe even someone he's just met. It would be a full circle moment. A man who once woke up powerless in a hospital, now dying with purpose and agency. That kind of sacrifice gives weight to the years he survived and meaning to his suffering. It turns him from a lucky survivor into a lasting symbol. And it reinforces the idea that in this world, nobody is truly safe, but that doesn't mean their story can't matter. The franchise's brutal honesty, one thing that separates 28 Days Later, and to some extent 28 Weeks Later, from other zombie-adjacent horror films, is its willingness to show how cruel and random survival can be. The deaths are often senseless, sudden, and shocking. Mark, Frank, Doyle. Heroes don't get plot armor, and villains don't always get their comeuppance. Jim's death would fit within that tradition, but it could still be emotionally resonant, especially if he dies trying to protect the next generation. Maybe 28 Years Later isn't just a continuation of his story, but a handoff. Maybe Jim is the bridge between the world that was and the world that's still struggling to be reborn. His death could symbolize the price of survival in a world that's been broken for too long. And more importantly, it could give the new protagonist, possibly his daughter, or someone inspired by him,